Terri has to hug everybody first. But I'm not going to throw stones because I usually do the same thing. I'm Diane, and I'm glad to be your MC for our history series here at the Chapin Library. And don't you just love hearing about the past?
Yes.
And how cool? Well, we're really going to learn a lot about it. Because Terri has been here a long time. And she's going to tell you all about it. Now, y'all probably read, hi Mark, first of all, y'all know this. This is our mayor. Hey, tell you what, when Mark Krua was here, all during the previous series that we had, I wanted to say, hey, and by the way, Mark is running for mayor. But of course, I wasn't allowed to do that. And now we can say, congratulations.
Yes.
And we know you're going to do great things. As a media person, I can tell you, no one in the community was ever nicer and more concerned to the media than Mark Krua. When we called him, he responded instantly. And so I know that you're going to respond to the contingency in Myrtle Beach the same way. Thank you, Mark. So here's what I want to tell you. First of all, Terri was mortified when she walked in here today and saw all of her trophies. She did not bring these trophies. She did not bring her crown. She donated all this stuff to the library as part of the history project for the library. And so she was mortified when she saw it. She said, oh, people are going to think that I'm bragging. No, we know you wouldn't be bragging, but I want y'all to know that I talked with some of Terri's friends and got some comments that she might not tell you, and maybe weren't in Jen's bio that she dished out about Terri. First of all, if there's any men in here who dated Terri, oh my, Terri, that got a good laugh. I can tell you that we're not going to have any kiss and tell going on at the library. Listen to y'all.
Come on now.
You're sick people. And there's Dino back there. He's sitting there with a straight face. He ain't saying nothing. And so we figure we're going to hear lots of great things later in our question and answer period. But here's a couple of things I found out that maybe you all don't know. That Terri was honored by Coastal Carolina University. She was honored for her philanthropy, and she continues to be a great philanthropic citizen of our community. I don't want to stand in front of Terri, but I'm having trouble with the microphone. There you go. Terri has been incredibly involved in our community. She currently serves on the board of the Carolina Master Chorale. She continues her work, which John and she started way back when with Savannah's Playground. And she does all kinds of wonderful things in our community. But some of the things you may not know, she's got 3 children and 10 grandchildren. Look at her. She does not look like a grandma at all. Of course, I don't know what a grandma's supposed to look like. And then her children, here's what happened. She has a set of twins and a set of triplets in this grandchildren mix. Isn't that something? Now, she was a tomboy. You look at these crowns and you know, all the stuff from the pageants. She was a tomboy. She played sports, and her friends tell me she was really good. They said she was really good at baseball and football. How about that? She wasn't interested at all in beauty pageants, but when she got to Coastal Carolina University, they convinced her to be in a pageant. And she won. She became Miss Coastal Carolina. And then she became Miss Myrtle Beach. She was Miss Southern 500. And let's see, what else? Sun Fun. She was Miss Sun Fun. Thank you for yelling that out. But the title she's most proud of is being Mrs. John Rhodes. And of course, he was our former mayor. And I think they had about 27 years together. So anyway, Terri also did some radio work in our community. Because of her pageant work, she also went on to do some modeling in New York. Hopefully she'll tell us about that. She is said to be a great cook. She loves to make soup, and Dino Drosis tells me that she makes the best soup, tomato, potato, beef vegetable, and whatever she's got in the refrigerator, she throws in the soup and calls it schoolhouse soup. And so, you know, Terri's a great cook. Also, she makes a fabulous pot pie, somebody told me. And she loves all kinds of music except for rap. And one more thing. Back in the day, listen to this. You might not know this. Terri did a voiceover for a pinball machine. Well, video poker? Video poker. I was trying to be nice. And yeah, she came to our studio one day and said, I need a voiceover. And here's what she said. Busted. So, I'm now turning, say it for us.
Busted.
Oh, yeah. Very sexual, as you can imagine. All right, y'all, we're glad you're here for Terri Springs.
Testing. It's not working.
Where's Jim?
I'll try this.
Let me catch it. Just.
Testing. Yeah, there you go. Okay. First of all, when I went to your studio, I was hired to read numbers. It was for video poker. They paid me a lot of money, so of course I did it. I was supporting 3 kids. I was a single mom. So we're going through, and your wonderful husband, when we get to the words, and he said, now you're supposed to say busted. And I said, busted? And he said, well, say it. Let's do it different ways. So I went, busted. They chose that version. They put it out on the video poker machines. People would get so upset that I had to go back and redo the busted. So that was fun. But the two of us have crossed, our paths have crossed since I came back from New York in '91. As far as media goes, as far as our mayor, Mark Crua, I would call Mark and I would say, okay, what's going on? Because I had a 30-minute show every Sunday morning, and I needed to interview people, and I'd say, what's going on in the city? Who do you want me to talk to? Blah, blah, blah. Always responds. I can't say enough wonderful things about our mayor. So where do y'all want to start?
When you got here. How you got here? How did I... There we go again. Jen.
Yeah.
Busted. Here, honey. Are we?
Okay.
Okay. All right.
So, all right, how it all got started. So, when I was about 3.5, 4 years old, my mother became ill with tuberculosis. So, I had a baby sister, and we were living in Columbia, and my sister got to stay in Columbia with my mother's parents, and I was shipped down to the beach with my grandparents. Oh, poor me. It was a magical time in my life, and it was a bonding with my grandparents that I will never forget. My grandfather's family was from Sicily, and when they came to the United States, they settled in Little Italy and Baltimore. So he would have these little sayings that he would share with me, but there was no doubt in anyone's mind I was the favorite grandchild. I sat on his knee at Tony's restaurant, and he taught me my numbers by teaching me the numbers on the
Cash register.
Cashier. Yeah. All right. Is that Phil back there? Are you hiding? Come back over here. A schoolmate of mine, Councilman Phil Render. So he taught me my numbers that way, and I got to give out dum-dum lollipops to all the children who cleaned their plate. So my grandfather being Italian, it was not a jukebox that sat beside the door, it was a piccolo. So he would put a nickel in, and he would say, "Dance, Terri, dance," and I would, because I love that man so much. And I guess he taught me, besides so much love, he taught me to be kind of free in my expression. Maybe a little too free. Anyway, but my mother got better, and I went back to Columbia, but every summer I would come to the beach, and I would live with my grandparents. And way back then, you know, in the late 50s and in the 60s, the restaurant was here, and then connected to it. Oh, I'm working? I'm working? No.
You were.
I was? I am? I'm working? Okay. So,
There we go.
their living quarters were connected to the restaurant. So, it was fun for me to sneak into the kitchen and grab a meatball or grab whatever I wanted. And that probably is where my love of food came from. I could not wait for my grandmother to allow me to help her make lasagna or to make the raviolis. I finally got to a point where she let me make the salads, but making meatballs was the first thing that she would let me do. But my summers here were very special to me, and when I was 12 years old, she put me to work. So I was a waitress in the restaurant at 12 years old, and Amanda is here. Amanda, stand up. I worked with Amanda at Tony's restaurant, and my very first table, 3 men. And they said to me, "Oh, are we your first table?" I said, "Yes, you are."
Oh.
"Hello, Mary Riley, come find a seat." I said, "Yes, you are." So when they left, they didn't leave me a tip. Well, okay. I'll never forget that. My father was the #1 salesman for Johnson & Johnson personal products, all but the very first year that he worked for them. And so they would send him to open up markets. So during the Cuban Missile Crisis, we were living in Florida. He was opening up the Florida market. So all children in Florida had to wear chains, dog tags actually, with our names and our addresses and telephone number on it. So I'll never forget that. After 2 years, they wanted to take my dad, they wanted to move him to Canada. Well, my mother looked at my dad and said, "Well, I'm going to Columbia, and you can come too if you want to." So my father told Johnson & Johnson that's just not going to work. Well, he was their #1 salesman, and they said, "Well, go back to Columbia and think about it." So they paid him for a year to do nothing. But it's not that he did nothing. He totally redesigned our backyard. Creating patios, interesting designs, different levels, and I was right there with him. So that's my love for designing. So I do design landscapes. And so I think that's where I fell in love, because I was doing it with my dad. So then, like I said, my summers were at the beach. I was back in Columbia for school. My dad decided at the end of that year he was not going to continue with Johnson & Johnson, and he opened up Jack Springs Tailoring. And he had a scholarship at the University of South Carolina, academic and athletic scholarship that he sponsored every year for 2 students, and did that until the day he died. So he said one day, after being in the tailoring business, Jack Springs Tailoring, and if you go to the stadium, they've erected something in memory of my dad. He made all the blazers for the traveling teams for the athletes at the University of South Carolina. So they have a little corner dedicated to him. So he said one day, "All right, leisure suits are really popular. I don't think tailoring is the business to be in. You know, polyester galore. And so he said, we're going to take a family vote. We're going to do one of two things. I'm going to buy a horse farm in Sumter, or we're going to the beach because my grandparents wanted to retire. They offered the restaurant to his older brother, his older sister, who said, not me. And when they offered it to my father, it was part of the bargaining. You want the horse farm, or you want the restaurant? And I was like, well, I'm going to the beach. I don't know about the rest of y'all. So we came to Myrtle Beach, and my family took over Tony's restaurant. My father doubled the size. Very, very successful. It opened in 53 and it closed in 2006. When it closed, we were the third oldest family-owned, continuously run restaurant on the Grand Strand. And when my grandparents had it, we were the last restaurant before you hit the North Carolina border. And that swing bridge would back up on a Sunday.
Oh, yeah.
You know, Amanda,
Yeah.
people would come out and order a pizza. Well, it took 20 minutes to make a pizza back then. It didn't make any difference. They were only 10 feet long, you know, down the road. We would run out and they would pay us. We sold pizzas like crazy when they would get backed up at that swing bridge. So when I moved here, it was the summer before starting 11th grade. And I was a little bit nervous and a little bit scared. I'd left all my friends in Columbia. I did have friends here, but most of them were up in North Myrtle Beach where the restaurant was. So I went down the hall not knowing anybody, and I made some really good friends, and Phil Render's one of them over there. Missy Davison, Marcy Singleton. Marcy and I were in geometry together, and and Missy Davison is the disco dancing queen. She won so many dance contests. It's crazy. It was just good. It was just easy. Our English teacher, Miss Joyner, would say, okay, the sun's out. Why don't we go to the beach? We would go to the beach and have class. Because at that time, you know, Myrtle Beach High School was on Kings Highway. And all we had to do was walk past. Oh, you're there. You're here too, Becky. I'm sorry.
Right across the street?
Yeah. So, you know, the high school was there. And so we would just walk across 16th Avenue, where the party house was, and just go to the beach, and we would have class at the beach. That was not unusual. You could do that back then. You can't do that now. So I think there were a lot of fun times that those of us who are older, there was so much more leniency, but we all knew, if you're like me, if you got in trouble, you were more scared to go home than the person that got, you know, that caught you doing what you weren't supposed to do. So things are different today. So then it was time to go to college. And my father would not let me go to the University of South Carolina like all my friends. He said, you are not going to Columbia. I was the youngest person in my class. So he made me go to Columbia College. Now, that's nice for some people. But it was a little too much hairspray and chit-chat for me. So I came home at Christmas and I said, please don't make me go back. And he said, oh, yes, you are. So when I went back for the second semester, I just made sure they wouldn't take me back. I was bad. I just wouldn't go to class. And I don't regret it, because when I got home and my father was furious with me, he looked at me. Your college education is on your shoulders now. I said, okay. So I worked that summer. I had my tips. I was able to pay tuition at Coastal Carolina University and buy my books. And I had a space open for a class, and I didn't know what I should take, and believe it or not, I did have some credits that did transfer over, so the guy that was my first love that I dated all through high school, Myrtle Beach High School, and through college was Jeff Roberts. Giant Jeff, if you remember Record Bar, if you remember Sounds Familiar, that was my guy. And he said, well, I'm taking this theater course. Why don't you take it? I said, okay. So Jenny Jones was the director at that time at Coastal Carolina. So I go in, and I'm in there for a couple of weeks or whatever, and she said, Terri, I need to speak to you at the end of class. I was like, okay, well, what do I do? So she said, you're representing the theater department in the Miss Coastal Carolina pageant. I said, oh, no, I can't do that. She looked at me and she said, you do want to pass my class, right? So it wasn't that I was talked into doing it, I was threatened to do it. And I did want to pass her class. So I did it. Well, lo and behold, I won the blame thing. So I realized that there was no scholarship involved in that. It was just, I got to cut ribbons, I got to do this, I got to do that. And I said, it would be really nice if there was a scholarship involved. So I tried to work to get that done. I was not able to do that. I don't know if anybody else has been able to do it since. But that was my first experience. And then my mother got the bug. It wasn't me that got the bug. It was my mom that got the bug. And my father was livid because it took me away from the restaurant. It took her away from the restaurant. We were a family-run restaurant. So, she wanted me to enter the Miss Sun Fun pageant. And the pageant actually, I think, was in Georgetown that year. I did not win it. And she said, why didn't you smile? And I said, I did smile. She said, not a bit. You did not. I was just that nervous. So, I don't know, a couple of years later, Miss Myrtle Beach came around and she wanted me to do that. So I said, okay, because that involved talent. Well, I've been dancing since I was 3 years old. That's why the guys let me to play football with them, because I had leg extension. I could kick the heck out of a ball. But I entered the Miss Myrtle Beach pageant, and Susie Benton was in there. Vanna White was in there. No, that was Miss Sun Fun, I'm sorry. Anyway, Miss Myrtle Beach pageant. So I danced, and I won the pageant. Well, I didn't realize when you win Miss Myrtle Beach, then you go to this festival and that festival and this, and it was like, oh my gosh, I got to keep doing this. So it was time for the Miss Southern 500, and I went to Darlington, and you have to be a city winner. You have to be invited, for this. So they have a competition called Miss Legs. So you are in your bathing suit. The curtain rises and stops about, right before the hoo-ha. So you're in your heels and you're in this bathing suit. Nobody knows who anybody is. The numbers are mixed up. And so this guy gets, my mom is there with her next door neighbor. And so this guy gets up and he says, you're Miss Myrtle Beach's mother, aren't you? And she said, yes, I am. She said, well, your daughter just won Miss Legs. And she said, oh, yeah, we know. Nobody knew. Well, I did. I won Miss Legs. So then the next night was the final night of the competition. Well, I won. Was it evening gown or was it swimsuit? I can't remember. I won that. And then I won Miss Southern 500. I won like everything but one category. those were the nicest people, and I say to work for, because you did. You worked, and you would talk about the Southern 500. You would talk about the history of the Southern 500. They were just the most wonderful people. So then I went to the Miss South Carolina pageant. Now this is a story. I am the only contestant who has officially been removed from the Miss South Carolina. So this is what happened. So we're doing preliminaries, and I'm warming up and I'm getting ready to go out and do my talent, and I'm dancing. I get out and I do my performance, and during my performance, when I kick, I'm like, oh no, I could feel it. I tore the muscles in my leg, and I finished my dance, and I got off the stage, and then I was like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? So I was, I think talent was like the last night of preliminaries, so the next night was the pageant. The next day, interviews and the pageant. So I was kind of hobbling into interviews, and they're like, are you all right? And I said, well, I just kind of overextended my leg last night. So as it turned out, I could not walk by the end of the day. And so they brought, when all of the girls from all the different cities were there, they brought out a stool for me to sit on, and I was officially dismissed from the Miss South Carolina pageant and came home. But I made the front page of every paper in South Carolina because I had the most audacious costume for my talent. I had feathers, it was purple, it was velvet, it was fabulous, and I wish I could find that newspaper, but I cannot. But I made the front page of every paper. It was just unbelievable. But then after that, I entered, and let me tell you what, I did the Miss Myrtle Beach pageant because there was scholarship money involved. That's why I did it. And then I got scholarship money for Miss Southern 500. So then Miss Sun Fund comes along. I had already been doing, because of Miss Myrtle Beach, I'd already been doing some things with the chamber. I mean, that was a time when, the chamber was that tiny building. It was a great group of people. So I entered the Miss Sun Fund pageant. I won the pageant, and it was home. It was just home. And I could not wait to tell everybody about the Grand Strand. I could not wait to tell everybody about Myrtle Beach. When I got here in 71 and Labor Day would come along, you could roll a bowling ball down Kings Highway and you wouldn't hit anything. Or if there was a blue car coming, you knew it was one of three people. I mean, it was abandoned. And, but during the Miss South Carolina pageant, there was a gentleman in the audience, and there was one of the judges who came up to me and said, you need to go to New York and you need to model. And I'm like, oh yeah, okay. Does anybody remember John Baldwin, when John Baldwin was here? So John Baldwin would work with the hospital guild, the women from the hospital, and they would do a fashion show every year. And so this particular year, they invited,
The Grand Street Hospital Auxiliary?
yeah, but they invited Oscar de la Renta, Oscar de la Renta down here. And they had already had Bill Blass, but Oscar de la Renta was here. And John Baldwin called and said, could you please model for us? And I said, okay. Well, they also called a friend of mine, Pam Gore. She's Pam Gore now. And she did it too. So Oscar de la Renta asked both of us if we would come to New York. Now, it was one thing if a judge said it, but when Oscar de la Renta asked you to come to New York, it's like, okay. So I thought about it for a little while, and so I decided on a whim. My parents left on a Friday to go to Columbia for a South Carolina football game. And they were not coming back until Sunday afternoon. So Saturday at 9:30 at night, my godparents came over and picked me up, drove me to Florence, put me on a train. I kind of like ran away. And I got on a train and went to New York and landed in Penn Station, and I had $200 in my pocket. That was it. I don't know if I was stupid or I just had a lot of faith. But things worked out. When I got up there, it was a Sunday. The next day was Columbus Day. And so the day after that, I went to Oscar de la Renta's studio. Are you going to sleep?
I'm trying. I'm trying to
Do you need to leave?
My shoulder.
Take your jacket off. Maybe you're too hot. But I went to see him, and he said, okay, now you have to find, I can't hire you until you have an agency. So I went to Ford Agency, and they said, well, there's a smaller agency. It's called Beaumont Agency. We suggest you go there. I went there. They hired me. It wasn't long after that Ford Agency bought Beaumont. And I had so much fun, and I made a lot of money. But you cannot be in a business like that because your body is your commodity. So when somebody looks at you and says no, you kind of have to learn to just let it roll off your back and say, okay, it's no for this person, but it'll be right for somebody else. I think I probably built up a lot of my shell from those years in New York. Then this guy came along. My daughter is here, and my granddaughter's here. So this guy came along. I met him because my roommate's TV blew up. And so we went to a bar, and I said, it's Sunday. She said, this is New York, not South Carolina. We can do bars on Sunday. She kept talking about this guy Bert. She was crazy about him. I'm like, okay. So he walks in, she says, oh, there he is. I'm like, okay. Well, he was kind of distant, and then he came over and he started talking to us, and then he said, oh, a friend of his had opened up a bar. You know, we should go. And well, he takes off in his car and leaves us, and so we ride with another one of his friends. Well, we get to the other bar, and so he comes over and he asked me out, and I said, no, thank you. So he came over a second time and asked me out, and I said, listen, if you want to ask somebody out, ask my roommate, ask Bernadette. He said, I don't want to go out with Bernadette. I said, well, I'm not going out with you. And so he came over a third time, and I can't repeat what he said to me, because it's as funny as the hoo-ha thing. And so Bernadette, meanwhile, had come over, and she said, is he asking you out? I said, yes. She said, well, go out with him. I said, no, you like him. She said, but you can be late for the date, and I can sit there and talk to him. I was like, oh, God, this is high school. So I was like fiddling in the room, and she was talking to him. Well, we went out for dinner, and we keep driving, and I'm like, okay, I don't know New York, and this guy's been driving for 45 minutes. Where the hell are we going, you know? He took me to this very romantic restaurant that was upstate. It was in Rockland County, so we had gone over the Tappan Zee Bridge. And so it was called Bully Boys. And they had a lake, and there were swans, and it was just, we were the last people in the restaurant because we were just talking. Then we walked into the park, got to parking lot and got into his car, and we're just talking. Next thing we knew, it was 6 o'clock in the morning. So he took me back home, and of course Bernadette thought the worst of me. But anyway, Bernadette said, "Oh, did Terry invite you over?" And I said, "No, I did not." I was cooking for some friends that night. So she invited him, and at the end of the meal, she said, "Well, let's all go." And I said, "No, I'm going to stay and wash dishes." And he said, "I'm going to stay and help Terry." Okay. That was it. That was it. The very next day I met his parents, and a year later we were married. But what was really funny was that I came home for Christmas, and Christmas afternoon there was a knock at my door at my parents' house, and I opened up the door and it was Bert, and I'm like, "What in the, how did you get how did you know where I live?" He got it from Bernadette. And I said, "What are you doing here?" He said, "I wanted to make sure you came back to New York. And by the way, Merry Christmas." And he handed me keys, and there was an XJS Jaguar in front of the house. I said, "I think I'm going back to New York." So I did, and I had a very short-lived career modeling, but what did happen with modeling, I mean, I wasn't tall enough to be one of the big runway models, but I was tall enough to do some runway modeling. I was the perfect size because I was about as big as your little finger. I was a fit model for a lot of companies, and especially the French designers. And so there was one designer, his name was Ron Levis. He was the #1 bridal designer in New York. He was the first designer that ever put a flower on a wedding dress. And so there was this daytime show, not As the World Turns, not, what is it?
Days of Our Lives.
Somebody's,
One Life to Live, Days of Our Lives.
Days of Our Lives. It was Days of Our Lives. You're right. It was Days of Our Lives. So one of the lead characters on Days of Our Lives was getting married. So NBC came to Ron's studio and said, "We want you to design the dress. So we need 5 dresses. And by the way, do you have a model?" I was Ron's favorite model. I always got to do the best dresses, and always the finale. So Ron said yes to both. So NBC flew me out to LA, put me up at the Beverly Wilshire. My liaison with NBC was a wonderful man. He took me around and showed me this is Hollywood, and this is this, and this is this, and this is Beverly Hills, and it was mind-boggling. So we went over to the studios, and I was supposed to model the dresses on Wheel of Fortune. Daytime, we're going back. Chuck Woolery and Susan Flannery. So I get over there, and I've got hair, makeup, the dresses are there, and you tape 3 shows one day, and then on another day you tape 2 shows. So Susan Flannery and I kind of headed off, and we became friends. And she said, "So where are you staying?" And I told her, "Well, we're going to go out tonight." And I'm like, "Okay." I'm this Southern girl who went to New York, had this fairy tale life, and now I'm in LA, and Susan Flannery wants to take me out on the town. Absolutely, I'm going. It had gotten cold. All of a sudden, it got cold in LA. So she called me and she said, "Okay, I'm on my way. I'll be there in 15 minutes. So I left my room, which was a suite, by the way, and the bathroom was total marble. I mean, I'd never seen anything like that in my life. And I was downstairs. She pulls up in her little 2-seater Mercedes, and she opens up the trunk. She said, "I knew you wouldn't have a coat. Pick one."
Wow.
I'm like, "What?" there were like 5 fur coats in the trunk of her car. Pick one. Okay. Okay. She had one on. So we went one place and everything, it was fun. It was so, and she was so full of life. So then when we were talking, she found out, yeah, I played basketball. And I played basketball when there were 6 girls on the court, not 5. And so she said, oh, you want to shoot some hoops? And I said, why not? Where? We went to this house, and this very attractive woman walks out, and we're shooting hoops. And I'm introduced to Mrs. Sammy Davis Jr. Althena and Susan were friends. So we're shooting hoops, we're just chatting, it's a girl thing, and who drives up the driveway but Sammy Davis Jr. So I got to meet Sammy Davis Jr. The liaison from NBC came to get me one day to take me to lunch at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel. And we walk in and he said, by the way, you're having lunch with Lee Marvin today. This was when Lee Marvin was going through the the very first palimony that ever happened. He was going through palimony. He wasn't, real chipper, but he was polite, he was nice, and I had lunch with Lee Marvin. The last night that I was there, I was invited to a party, and Debbie Boone was there. You Light Up My Life. This was like a year after or so after that song was popular. So she was there, and this had something to do with her, and I can't remember what it was. But I'm looking around. I don't know anybody. I don't know any of these people. But I see an empty table. So I'm walking over to the empty table, and I look to my right, and it's not Rocky, but it's Rocky's brother-in-law. Adrian's brother! Burt Young was sitting there, and I guess he was just like me. He wasn't real chatty, or he didn't know anybody. I don't know. But we started talking, and one thing led to another, and he asked me about music, and I said, oh, I love music. I listen to music all the time. Oh, what do you like? I said, I listen to a lot of jazz. You do? Who do you listen to? So I named, he said, whoa, you really do like jazz. I said, I do. You want to go to a jazz bar? I said, okay, but I've got a red eye back to New York tonight. He said, I'll have you back in time. We got in his car and we went to a jazz bar. It was just, things like this just don't happen. But I'm very fortunate that these things have happened to me. I got back home. Meanwhile, when I was at NBC, Susan had announced to them that she wanted to leave Wheel of Fortune. There was this new thing called cable. New. It was new. 1978, 77, 78. This was, 78, 79. This was new. Cable was new. So Susan shared with me that she wanted to leave the program. And so one day we were playing and she said, oh, come up here and turn the letters, blah, blah, blah. I had no idea what she was up to. Well, I got back to New York in January. This is when they filmed everything. I'd been out there for a whole week. It was fabulous. And I got back home. Well, in February, I received a contract. And I was offered the job. And I didn't take it. And I don't regret it, not 1 minute of it. What I think is, kind of crazy about the whole thing is that 2 years later, he hired Vanna. We're both from the same place. So obviously, Merv Griffin has a thing for Myrtle Beach girls. But I am not a West Coast person. Living on the East Coast, we get, a week's notice before a hurricane comes. there had been some devastating earthquakes in California, and I'm just not a West Coast person. So I don't regret that one bit. I've got 3 fabulous children. Like I said, my daughter is here, and her youngest, Sarah, is here today. Taya's my oldest. Next came Brad, and then Reed. So Brad and Reed are the ones that had multiples. So I say I have a daughter and 2 rabbits. Now, this happened. So one of my sons has twins, and a year later he has an uh-oh baby. I mean, it's like having triplets. So what does the other son do? He has triplets, and a year later he has an uh-oh baby. So it's like having quads. I looked at my boys, and I'm like, do you not know how this happens? I mean, seriously. So, but I am blessed to have 10 grandchildren. My son Brad is a type 1 diabetic, and his son Teddy is also a type 1 diabetic. So I am an advocate for diabetes research, and you will see that on my Facebook page every once in a while. You will also see recipes on my Facebook page. I have people that will message me and they'll say, you had a recipe for this or for that, and I try to find it and put it back up for them. I came back to the beach in 1991 with my 3 children, single mom, 3 kids. I couldn't find a job. Nobody wanted to hire a mom with 3 kids. I mean, if one got sick, you weren't going to show up for work, right? So I finally got a job down at Wachesaw as the tennis director down there, and did that. And then it was my daughter's birthday. It was Taya's birthday. So I called in to Billy Smith's morning show and said, Billy, because Billy knew me, it is my daughter's birthday. Well, lo and behold, Taya won the birthday prize package. Well, and it was pouring down rain that morning, and I am desperately looking for a payphone because he said, you have 5 minutes to call. I'm like, oh, I'm panicking. So I stopped at the Pizza Hut, which, what was it, on 34th maybe? So I stopped at the Pizza Hut at the payphone. I'm sopping wet now because the rain's coming in. Billy, he said, Terri, you really didn't have to call in 5 minutes. I mean, I know you. So I said, well, he said, when are you going to come by and get this? I said, well, not today. I'll come by tomorrow. Well, I went to where I thought the radio station was, and it wasn't there, so I called, and he told me how to get there. And he said, come on in. Play with me on the radio. So I had a few minutes before I had to be at Wachesaw. So I went in, and he said, oh, I have a friend in the station with me. Terri, say hello to everybody. I said, hello, everybody. And so we chatted a little bit, and I said, okay, gotta go, need to get to work. And he said, well, is there anything you want to say? I said, you're doing great on Power 98. I get to Wachesaw, the phone is ringing, and it's Billy. And he said, get back up here. I said, I can't, Billy. He said, my boss wants to talk to you. I said, about what? Am I in trouble? I mean, I don't have a license. He said, you don't have to have a license anymore. You did back in the day. If you were going to be on radio, you had to have a license. Well, now, at this point in time, you didn't have to. This was 1992. So he said, no, he wants to offer you a job. I said, as what? He said, to work with me in the mornings. I was like, whoa. So anyway, I set up a meeting, and lo and behold, Terri Springs, it was Billy Smith and Terri Springs. Calvin Hicks was with us for a while, but it was obvious that Billy and I had the rapport, and we had the chemistry, and it was fun. I got up at 3:30 in the morning, never regretted it, not one bit, because I was going to have fun. And Billy would start with something, and I knew exactly where that man's mind was going. And I would just scream on the microphone and say, you can't say that. It's not 7:30. The kids aren't in school yet. So I was like the mother. But there were people who honestly thought that Billy and I were married because the chemistry was so strong between the two of us. I had never had training. I mean, I never had my license. I mean, it was just, and I've never in my life ever interviewed for a job. Things have kind of just happened to me. So anyway, shortly after being on the radio with Billy, the brand new convention center, the expanded convention center was opening up. And John Rhodes was the, help me.
Executive director.
What? Yeah, the executive director, thank you. The executive director of the expansion committee. So, I'm up there and John walks over, because I mean I knew John, growing up here, I knew John, but when I left to go to New York, John was married to Suzanne. Well, he wasn't anymore. He was divorced the year before I moved down here. So he came over and he said, what are you doing here? And I said, I'm here representing the station. What station? So at that time it was Power 98 became Mix 97.7. So he looked at me, he said, you live here? And I said, yeah. He said, so all these times I've been seeing you, you're not coming down from New York, you live here now? And I said, yeah. He said, well, you must not go out much. And I said, well, I just don't go to the places you go. That's John was single and enjoying every minute of it. And I mean, he was 50 and trying to, it was fine. It was fun. But he said something about, well, are you coming tonight? And I said, yes, I'm coming tonight. Well, who are you bringing? And I said, well, that's none of your business. So if a girl wants to have a really good time, she takes her gay hairdresser with her. So there was a band and everything, and so I went with my gay hairdresser. Well, we walk in to find out where our table is, and John's pacing the hallway. And immediately he raises it. I got it. You don't need to do that. I got it. So he takes Roy and I in. Now, if you're press, you're always at the back of the room. You're never at the front of the room. Never. Guess where my table was? Ringside to the dance floor, right across the table from John's ringside table on the other side of the dance floor. I don't know who he moved, and I don't know. But anyway, the moves were starting. And so I would dance with Roy, and then John would come over and ask me to dance. And so finally, about the third time, I said, John, you have a date. He said, oh, don't worry about her. So Roy said, you have a problem. And I said, I think I do. And John started calling, and it seemed like everywhere I would go, John would show up. And I said, do you have a tracker on me or something? What in the world is going on? For 3 months, that man haunted me. He followed me around. He would show up at Skeeter's, because I would go to Skeeter's 2 or 3 times a week after I would get off the air at the radio station, and I'd go have a BLT. And I would sit at the family table, and Bob Grissom, who was the mayor at that time, would be there, and several other people. And we were talking politics. I was getting information for the talk show I had to do on Sunday mornings, and it was just, it was interesting. But if you wanted to know what was going on in Myrtle Beach, you went to Skeeter's and sat at that table. John started showing up. So the guys at the table would say, John, she's too smart to go out with you. But finally, John made me laugh. He just made me laugh. So finally, after 3 months, I said, okay, all right, Saturday night,
So he came to the house, he picked me up. I lived in the forest at Briarcliff at the time, so he made a right and we're going into Myrtle Beach. We get in front of, at that time, Briarcliff Mall, and something was said, and I said, yeah, I told my dad that you were taking me out. I thought he was going to have a heart attack. He said, oh my God, you told Jack that I was taking you out? Your dad's crazy. And I said, I know. And that's why you will treat me like the lady that I am. I am not one of those 20-year-olds that you go out with. So anyway, that was it. We laughed all night. We laughed every day after that. We laughed every day until he left me with COVID. And it was fun. It was fun. And people used to come up to me and say, I wish I had a marriage like yours. Now, I'm not saying we didn't have ups and downs, but John did not like controversy. And when he was mayor, he was able to bring consensus on so many things. So John knew what buttons to push. Do you agree, Wayne? John knew how to bring consensus. So if there was something that we disagreed about, it's not that we argued, but we disagreed, but John didn't even like that. So it was a magical marriage. It was wonderful. I laughed all the time, and then he's gone. So then Terri had to pick her life back up again. And I would not have done it without my girlfriends, and so many of them are in this room right now. When John died, I went into shock, and I immediately lost my vocabulary. So my girlfriends would say, it is charades with Terri. I could get to the middle of a sentence and look at you and say, could you please just tell me what I said to you because I don't remember. I would talk about something, it's like Oscar de la Renta. I know that as well as I know anything, but I do have trouble pulling things sometimes. I have trouble with 3 and 4 syllable words. There was a disconnect. There was a cognitive test done on me. They said, oh, it's long COVID. You'll be fine in 6 months to a year. Well, I wasn't. And then in January of 23, I lost my voice. And I would wake up in the middle of the night choking because I couldn't breathe. So my doctor did steroids and antibiotics. I did 3 rounds of that. Then I went to a specialist, and he said the same thing. Well, then, anyway, I ended up at MUSC with a specialist down there who had operated on my vocal cords twice before, 14 years before this incident. And her name was Dr. Lucinda Halstead. I love that woman. So she walked in the door and she said, I can't believe you came down here without John. She loved John. And so I told her, and she said, oh, and I said, I can't talk. So she put the camera down my throat. I had to do some testing. She sent someone else in to work with me. And a little bit later she came in and she said, okay, I have a diagnosis for you. You have spastic dysphonia, which is, I'm not trying to scare you, a symptom of MS. I said, okay. I said, I'm fine. She said, you're not upset? And I said, no. I mean, if I know what I'm dealing with, I'm fine with that. She said, there are several ways to treat this, but I think with you in particular, we need to use barbiturates. And I went, I got all through my 60s. I got all through the 60s and the 70s and didn't do drugs. But here I am on barbiturates. So I was like, okay, this is funny. And she said, how do you have this attitude? And I said, what's my choice? I mean, I can't change it. So I think that's how I found my joy after John died. I understood there were things I could not change. And when I accepted that, my life changed. And I found my joy. And I have to tell you, I am happy every day of my life. I wake up happy every day of my life. Even when things don't go the way that I want them to go, I am happy every day of my life. I am grateful. I live with gratitude every day. I know you hear people say that, but it does change your life. And I look at grief, I don't know, maybe differently than other people do. People will say things get better with time. I don't think time has anything to do with grief. I think grief should be measured in stages, not in time. Everybody's journey is going to be different. And grief is a passage. And it's not a place where we're supposed to stay. So, I can just hear my dad in the background going, get with the program or get out. So I got with the program. And I am truly happy. What else do you want to know?
We learned a lot about happiness from you, and just watching you, we can tell how happy you are.
There are people here who want to ask questions, so I just want to ask.
Can I say one thing?
Oh, of
One
course,
more
this is
thing.
your show.
All right. First of all, I want to tell you that I had to stoop back here because I was starting to cry. I am touched that so many of you even showed up. And longtime friends, new friends, you really have touched my heart, and thank you so much.
Well, you've obviously touched theirs, and that's why they're here, Terri. But we just want to know one thing before we open the floor to questions. What do you miss most about old Myrtle Beach? The Myrtle Beach that you grew up with once you moved here, went to high school, and even coastal Carolina. What is it about the environment, the community? What is the one thing that you wish we still had?
Living was very easy back then. Living was very easy. You knew everybody, and you knew everybody was going to take care of you if you needed it. It was the small town that exploded in the summertime. You could leave Myrtle Beach High School and get to Conway in 15 minutes. You could. You could leave here, and you could be in Charleston in an hour and 15 minutes. But not anymore. I think as we get older, I'm 70 now, and I think as we get older, we cherish those friendships, those high school girlfriends of mine and my college girlfriends. Those relationships are so dear to me. I think I try to keep my world small. I think as we get older, we like to simplify. At least I do. I don't want the drama. I don't want the headaches. I just want a very simple, very easy life, because that's what was here. That's what I love, and that's how I think I choose to stay.
Peace, love, and rock and roll. Who has a question for us, Terri?
Oh, she's got written questions over there. Go over there.
Do you really? Have written who?
Me?
Yeah.
Annabeth said, will you answer my question? Yes. Now, will you answer truthfully? I went, what? What is it you you don't already know about me. Now you know it all.
Okay, yes, dear.
So you've done so much. What's next on the radar?
Oh, gosh. So I'm designing landscapes, and I enjoy that. I really do. I love being outside. I love working in the yard. I love going to somebody's house when they say, I just need, and I'm like, oh no, you need more than that. So I like giving I like sharing my vision with people. I like creating beauty. I love to cook. So one day I'm going to have a party at my house and I'm going to cook, and I know a lot of people over there. But I don't know what's next. I don't know what's next, and I'm just open to whatever is next. I have no plans.
Tell them about your college.
Terri, talk to us about how you developed your political acumen.
Oh my goodness. Okay. I probably all started my political life. You want to know how that started? Okay. It probably all started at Skeeter's. I really think it kind of all started at Skeeter's. It kind of got me excited about local politics, about state politics. I did, as a teenager, campaign for John Jenrette. So I had a little taste of that. But I think when I did that show, that interview on Sunday mornings, there were some politics that came into that show. I would interview the Myrtle Beach Police Department. I would try to interview the mayor at that time, Mark McBride. I could not get one, could not get an interview, except when it was time for election. I remember interviewing Mark when he ran against Bob Grissom, and the difference in those two interviews. And it broke my heart. It broke my heart to see Bob. It just didn't look like he had the get up and go in him. And Bob was a good mayor. But, you know, every once in a while, this city wants something new. I know that by personal experience. And then actually I got a phone call. I got 3 phone calls in one day. Oh, I heard John's running for mayor. I said, really? Oh, okay. So John shows up at my house for dinner that night. I said, is there something you want to talk to me about? He said, no. I said, there's nothing going on in your life that you feel like you want to discuss with me? John, are you running for mayor? I said, oh, well, I thought I'd put some feelers out there. I said, and maybe you don't want to talk that. I mean, we weren't married yet, but we had been dating for a while. And, you know, that's one thing I thought maybe you would discuss. But we discussed it that night. So I told him, I said, are you serious about this? And he said, yes. We cannot endure any more negative publicity, being on the front page of USA Today in a negative way. It's happened twice. Things have got to, and nobody's stepping up. I said, okay, if you want to be mayor, I'll make sure you're the next mayor. And I taught John how to answer questions. And I would drive him to the debates, and I would say, these are the 10 bullet points. Get 7 of them, and I'm happy. And he listened to me, and he always spoke off the cuff. John never read a speech, ever. He spoke off the cuff. And I'll never forget when Mark McBride was running against John, and they were at a debate, and the commentator said, okay, the next question is for you, Mayor Rhodes. Why did you give if you don't think Mark McBride is competent, why did you give him a $5,000 donation when he ran for Senate or Congress or whatever that was? And John immediately blurted out, I just wanted him out of town. I could never have designed a better answer than that. John, that was just John. But it was fun representing this city. People used to say something to me about being the first lady, and I would say, I just happened to have been the last girlfriend. So that was my response to that. But I have to tell you, it was a great honor to represent this city and to travel with John and to meet different people from different places. When I met Cory Booker out in California, we were in San Francisco for their 100th anniversary of the new City Hall, which is, if you've never seen it, it is stupendous. And it was a huge celebration. And this was the annual mayor's meeting that they would have. I met a lot of different politicians, John McCain. I mean, when we had the debates here, I was privileged. I was privileged enough that I got to meet these people. I got to hear different points of view. When John was in Washington at one point, the phone rang that morning, the phone rang that night, and he answered it, and a person on the other end said, Hillary Clinton would like to have breakfast with you tomorrow. He said, yeah, I'm a Republican. And the other voice said, we know, she doesn't care. She would like to have lunch with you, breakfast with you. So he had breakfast with Hillary. During that breakfast, Hillary Clinton says, so, you drive my favorite car. And it was the Jaguar. It was the two-seater Jaguar that John was driving at the time. And she knew the color. She knew everything about the car. He was like, wow, her research team is really good. So when the Democrats came, when Obama was here and she was here and the guy from North Carolina, what's his name?
John Edwards.
Yeah, John Edwards. And they're all on stage, and it was on the front page of a lot of newspapers across the country. Here's John shaking Hillary's hand, and they are laughing like crazy because John is saying to her, by the way, the Jaguar's in the parking lot, and it's all revved up and warmed up and ready to go, and you are. So they're laughing like crazy. And Obama's like, what's going on? And I just have to say, I don't know what I've done to have this wonderful life. But I'm very grateful and very thankful.
And you deserve it. And you deserve it. Friends, let's hear it for Terri Springs. That was awesome. Now, Jen, the librarian for Chapin Memorial Library, has got a few speeches for you. Come on up. A few things she'd like to mention. Oh, you've got a mic. That's right. You stole my microphone. I forgot.
Yeah, she didn't ask me that question. Is she going to ask me that question?
No, maybe you need to come use this one.
Jen, were you going to ask me a question?
You threatened her with a question earlier. It made her panic.
No, I asked her if she was going to ask it because she knows the answer.
I do. I want to hear the story of when you arrived in New York and being set up on a date.
Oh, yeah. So, I was with the agency. So, the new girls, you kind of have to break them in. So, I was a new girl. So, it was not unusual if there was a celebrity in town and they needed somebody on their arm that they would call one of the agencies, and, we were just on their arm. So, you'll never guess who my date was. Joe Namath.
That's great.
That was the worst date I've ever been on.
Was he wearing pantyhose?
No, Oh, he was wearing a fur coat. He was awful. He was so full of himself. It was awful.
Oh, yeah.
So it was Studio 54, and that was not my scene. That was not my thing. It was terrible, but I went on a date with Joe Namath.
Pretty impressive.
Okay,
You have something? Okay, Jen.
go Jen.
That was my last question. 'Cause I'd love to hear that. Sorry, these mics are not cooperating. Do we have anything else, Terry, that you want to do to say to wrap us up?
You told me you had a few announcements.
I do. Just want to remind everyone, we still have our jazz series going on Tuesday evenings. So if you have not been to one, we have 6 more performances coming up. You don't want to miss that. And we have another history talk in February with a very special guest speaker as well. And he's in the room, so he's going to give you a little teaser. This is on Wednesday, February 25th, again at 2 p.m.
Why are we doing it back there?
Sorry, Dino, you're going to have to deal with it. Yes.
Dino Thompson, everybody.
Is it working?
My longtime friend.
I just told Jen I wanted to talk about some of the juicy, delicious, interesting people I grew up with.
Scandalous.
And there are hundreds of them, but I'm going to zero in on several. And I'm probably going to end the talking mostly about one person who not everybody knows. He was only here about 5-6 months and we became friends, but when I met him, he walked in Dino's House of Pancakes, pointed at me and said, he had beautiful Paul Newman blue eyes, great smile, all the waitresses stopped working. And he said, you're Dino and you like to go shark fishing and we're going shark fishing at 3:30. I know you close at 3 o'clock. I said, do I know you? And he said, you will. And for the next 6 months, we became good friends, double dated, went fishing, cruised the bar. What I didn't know is he had just got out of prison, 3.5 years for several crimes. He didn't kill anybody or hurt anybody, but he stole everything that wasn't anything. Thousands of cars. And he had broken parole when I met him, so we're hanging out while he's broken parole. But he was just worth the price of admission, so I'd like to tell you about him. His name was John Patterson, but he had several. He had several real names. That wasn't his real name. But I'll talk about some of the other cool, interesting, juicy characters I grew up with. And John Patterson, who escaped from the FBI 3 different times after they had him surrounded. So he's worth a talk.
And then I do have the flyer out for Dino's talk. So here, magical when you were doing it, you had no problem. So please grab one of these, and I would also like to tease March's talk because we didn't have that one on the schedule. Thankfully, Wayne stepped up and he was able to get something organized for us. So Wayne, tell us a little bit about what's coming in March.
Thank you, Jen. I'm Wayne Gray. Terry, thank you for sharing with us today, having served with John for 12 years. Let me just quickly say, John always fought for the underdog, largely because he had Terry behind him. And there's a project that the city of Myrtle Beach was the first in the state of South Carolina, and it's Savannah's Playground. And if you haven't been to see Savannah's Playground down at Market Common, Terry was very much a part of that project in pushing John to build that facility for the city of Myrtle Beach. So, Terry, you deserve a lot of credit for that. Thank
There's
you.
a grand reopening coming.
There is. Look out for that. March the 11th, Wednesday at 2 p.m. in this room, Native historian friend Marion Foxworth is going to give the history of politics of Horry County and Myrtle Beach. So there will be a lot of salacious stories for that event. So look forward to seeing all of you then. You, Jen.
Just want to say one last thank you, Terry. Met a couple years ago, and we've been knowing you as loving you. So thank you for finally agreeing to do this because it's been a very special afternoon with you. So thank you very much. And thank you all for being here to support her and to support the library. Have a great day.
I think I know it. I knew it. Hey there. Hi. Still, stand up. Anyway, good to see you.
This girl, she's a lot younger than me, but I know her. I used to go down to that Rover restaurant.
How you doing? Nick? Good to see you. I hear you came to a meeting recently. I